So, I walk into this interview room feeling like I've got this nailed. Like I've rehearsed every answer, dressed nicer than I usually do, and I'm ready to basically charm the socks off these people. There's this weird, calm confidence bubbling up inside me. You know that feeling when you think, wow, today's actually gonna go well? Yeah, exactly that. I sit down, the two interviewers look up from their notepads, and the first few questions are pretty standard. Tell us about yourself. Why this company? And the usual. I'm cruising. Then, out of nowhere, one of them leans in, eyes twinkling but totally serious, and asks me this entirely unexpected question. Like, not what I was prepping for at all. It was something like, if you were a kitchen appliance, what would you be and why? I blinked. My brain just kind of froze for a second. I mean, who thinks to ask that in a job interview? I tried to laugh it off, saying something dumb like, I guess I'd be a microwave? Because I'm efficient, I heat things up fast, and then suddenly everything got super quiet. The room was so still, I swear you could hear a pen drop, and both of the interviewers exchanged this look. The kind you usually only see in movies when someone says something totally off script. I could feel my cheeks heating up, and I wondered if I'd just flopped so badly that the whole thing was just spiraling. Did I say that out loud? Was the microwave thing the worst answer possible? Or worse, did it just make everything awkwardly silent because it was so bizarre? Honestly, in that moment, my usually steady confidence took a nosedive, and I wasn't sure how the rest of the interview was going to go down after that. Spoiler alert, it was definitely not what I expected. Alright, so let me backtrack a bit and give you the full picture of how I ended up in this microwave debacle in the first place. So, who's this guy sitting in the interview chair? That's me, a guy who, up to that morning, had zero professional experience in the field I was trying to break into. Yeah, zero. Nada. I was fresh out of some online courses and a handful of side projects that maybe looked decent on paper, but were mostly me tinkering away in my apartment, pretending I knew what I was doing. I had been hustling for months, hitting up job portals, networking where I could, and, honestly, crushing a pretty impressive streak of rejections before this one came along. This wasn't just any company. This was the big league. Like that exclusive club where they expect you to swim with sharks but smile like a puppy dog at the same time. The kind of company with a reputation so formal and intimidating, my friends joked I'd need a tie and a law degree just to get past the front door. Walking in that morning, I remember glancing at the nameplate on the door, Global Ventures Ltd. Sounds prestigious, right? And the building itself wasn't messing around. Sleek glass, shiny brass handles, and immaculate marble floors that made every footstep echo ominously in the lobby. I half expected security in suits to scan my retinas before letting me through, and, well, I wasn't wrong. Now, before I was ushered into the interview room, I had a brief encounter with the receptionist, and trust me, this lady was something else. Picture this, mid-50s, rocking a neon pink blouse that screamed fashion experiment, oversized glasses sliding down her nose, and a mug of what looked like neon green smoothie, possibly healthy, definitely intimidating. She glanced up, barely making eye contact, said a very fast and peculiar, "Good morning," and then, as if she suddenly remembered I was there, asked me if I wanted some herbal tea. I said, no thanks, because honestly, am I supposed to say yes to a stranger's dubious tea during an interview? But here's the thing, she didn't just say no problem and move on. No, she tilted her head like a confused puppy, blinked twice, and announced in this low voice, well, you'll need it. I don't know what was weirder, the random tea offer or that cryptic comment. It stuck with me, like a weird little breadcrumb dropped on the path I was about to walk. Part of me laughed it off as quirky receptionist behavior, while a tiny voice in my head whispered, uh-oh, something's definitely off today. Anyway, eventually, she led me to the waiting area, which was like a minimalist's nightmare. White walls, sharp edges on the furniture, the kind of place designed to make you feel both important and petrified simultaneously. I sat there, staring at my resume on my lap, trying to psych myself up. I was ready to knock them out with charm, wit, and surprisingly polished answers, even if the cold sweat on my palms said otherwise. Once called in, the whole interview kicked off with the two panel members, both overachievers by the looks of it. One was this stern woman with glasses perched on the tip of her nose, typing furiously on a tablet. The other, a guy who smiled like he already knew he didn't like what he was about to hear. They started with the usual warm-ups. Tell us about yourself, what draws you here? All stuff I had memorized like a script. I was tracking well, batting back answers as quickly as their questions came. But then came that curveball. The question about kitchen appliances, and I could feel my brain short-circuiting in real time. Looking back, I can't help but wonder if the whole formal atmosphere and that strange receptionist encounter had set me up for this exact moment. The moment when the interview veers into uncharted territory. A place where scripted answers don't float, and whatever pretenses you came in with get thrown out the window. So yeah, going into this, everything about the company screamed no room for mistakes, yet somehow, the day felt like a surreal improv show rehearsed by nobody. Me? I was definitely not ready for Act 2. The early questions were, honestly, pretty straightforward. I was clicking along, ticking off the usual boxes like a well-oiled machine, why I wanted the job, how I'd handle stress, blah blah. And I thought, all right, maybe this isn't going to be the total disaster I feared. But then, right when I was starting to settle in, the air shifted. One of the interviewers, the woman with the glasses, suddenly shifted her gaze to me and said, "Imagine you're stranded on a deserted island. You can only bring 3 items, but one of them has to be a kitchen appliance. What do you bring and why?" I blinked. Not just because this was the weirdest question so far, but because nothing about this felt like it belonged in a corporate interview. My mind scrambled like a squirrel on espresso. Well, I guess I'd take a blender? Because, I could make smoothies, keep nourished, and maybe get creative with food prep? The words spilled out awkwardly, and I added, as a kind of desperate afterthought, and it's versatile, I think. There was this pause, like a really, really long pause, and I could almost feel the room tilting sideways. The 2 interviewers exchanged glances. This weird mix of, did he just say that, and how do we even respond to this? On their faces. And then, as if the universe wanted to throw in another curveball, that very moment, the receptionist popped her head in the room. Yep, the lady with the neon pink blouse and the suspicious green smoothie. She didn't just quietly check something off a list or whisper a quick update. Nope. She stepped fully into the room and held up a tiny cup like a prize trophy. "Herbal tea," she announced brightly, her eyes darting between the interviewers and me. "On the house." The whole panel blinked, like their brains simultaneously tried to process this bizarre interruption while pretending it was no big deal. I mean, who makes a tea run mid-interview? It felt like a scene from a comedy, except I was stuck right in the middle of it. Thanks," I mumbled, glancing at the cup as if it might explode or reveal some secret code. The receptionist gave a little nod, kind of like a coach cheering me on, but then disappeared as suddenly as she'd come, leaving a faint scent of something herbal lingering in the air. I watched the interviewers try to shake off the disruption and steer the conversation back on track, but I could tell the room had tilted into weird territory. Trying desperately to regroup, I decided to go for the classic move, sharing a personal story to illustrate my problem-solving skills. I launched into this tale about how I once had to fix a broken laptop right before a big presentation, juggling a frantic last-minute deadline with zero tech know-how. I figured that was safe territory, relatable, human, and showed I could keep cool under pressure. But instead of admiring nods or a follow-up question, the woman with glasses just lifted her eyebrows so high I thought they might float off her face. The guy, Mr. "I'm not impressed," let out this slow, almost theatrical sigh, and the silence stretched longer than before. I started wondering if my story came off as bragging or just plain weird. Maybe trying to save face just made me look more awkward. The blender answer, the tea interruption, and now my story, it all felt like pieces of some strange puzzle everyone else but me was solving. Am I bombing this? Or is there something else? Like some elaborate test going on behind the scenes that I just don't get yet? The receptionist's cryptic, "You'll need it," echoed in my mind again, and suddenly, that random act didn't feel so random at all. I sat there trying to decipher the tangled mess of signals, wondering whether I should just laugh it off or awkwardly ask what the heck was happening. But before I could gather my thoughts, one of the interviewers cleared her throat and said, "Let's move on." And just like that, the interview careened forward, but my confidence had taken a nosedive into uncharted waters. The whole day was turning into this surreal mix of awkwardness and mystery, and I was just hoping I'd somehow come out the other side without making a complete fool of myself. Days later, I stared at my inbox like it was a cryptic novel I wasn't sure I had the patience to decipher. The subject line was pretty bland, regarding your interview with Global Ventures Ledity, but the body was anything but. They wrote, "Thank you for attending the interview. We were impressed by your ability to maintain composure and think creatively despite unexpected circumstances. We value candidates who can adapt when things go off script. We will be in touch soon." I reread it a few times, trying to figure out if this was some kind of polite rejection masked in corporate euphemisms, but then a light bulb flickered on in my brain. The whole chaotic interview, the weird questions, the receptionist's strange behavior, the mid-question tea delivery, maybe it wasn't just random madness. What if it was all intentionally designed to throw me off balance, like a test disguised as a circus act? I mean, think about it. How many companies sit there quietly while you struggle to answer a question about kitchen appliances on a deserted island? How many let their receptionist dramatically interrupt a supposed professional setting with herbal tea? Probably none, unless they're trying to see if you can roll with punches without cracking. I leaned back in my chair, sipping from my own coffee, and started piecing it together. The company wasn't just interested in my resume or rehearsed answers. They wanted to know if I could handle, well, chaos. If I could survive the unexpected and still keep it together enough to be part of their team. Was it luck I didn't crumble completely, or was it some weird skill I didn't know I had? I spent a solid chunk of time debating that question, not just about the interview, but about how life itself throws curveballs when you least expect them. And honestly, even though the interview ended awkwardly and felt like a disaster from the inside, I realized I'd passed the real test. Not the scripted one about why this company, but the one about staying human when everything's spinning out of control. Now, I'm still waiting to hear if I got the job or not, but even if I don't, I feel weirdly victorious. Because sometimes the moments that make us feel like we're falling apart are the very ones that show what we're really made of. Makes me wonder, how would you have handled that tea break mid-answer? Would you have laughed, freaked out, or just gone with it? Either way, I'm pretty sure you couldn't have been more surprised than I was.